Bill Maher cracked a joke on live TV expecting laughs, but Jasmine Crockett's calm response left him speechless and the audience stunned. It came on a Tuesday. Just past noon, somewhere between a committee check-in and a half-warm lunch, reheated in a chipped microwave. Jasmine's phone buzzed once, twice, then lit up with an email from her scheduler. Subject, real time with Bill Maher. Invite confirmed. At first glance, it read like any other booking. Polite, professional. Standard language about ongoing conversations and polarization in American politics. A late-night appearance taped live in LA. The kind of thing that gets clipped, memed, maybe dissected on Twitter for a day and then forgotten, but Jasmine didn't open it all the way. Not yet. She slid it across the metaphorical desk in her mind, let it sit. She'd learned by now, sometimes the most important part of a message wasn't what it said, it was what it avoided. By the time her comms director, Amira, poked her head in 15 minutes later, the temperature in the room had already shifted. You see it? Yeah, Jasmine said quietly. I saw it. Amira crossed her arms. You want to guess how many times they used the word civility in the call sheet? 3, 5, and polarization, 7. They're setting a frame, Jazz. Jasmine nodded, slow and deliberate. She'd heard this tune before. She didn't need a beat to recognize the rhythm. We've checked. He's got a centrist pollster and a media guy on before you. No progressives, no counterbalance. So it's not a conversation, Jasmine said. It's a lineup. Amira didn't reply. She didn't need to. This wasn't fear. Jasmine had been in rooms colder than a soundstage and hotter than a viral clip. But there was something specific about this setup. The tone of it. The way it was being dressed in intellectual neutrality, as if the goal wasn't confrontation, but calibration. Like she was being brought in to be measured, scaled, dissected under studio lights. I'm not saying don't do it, Amira finally said. Just walk in with your back straight and your sentences sharper than his smirk. Jasmine smiled, but only for a second. Always do. She closed the email. The invitation was accepted, but the rules, they were still being written. The air at CBS Television City didn't hum. It hovered. Not cold, not warm, just sterile. A practiced sort of emptiness that made even the walls feel like they'd been bleached of personality. The kind of place where laughter echoed without memory. Jasmine sat in the dressing room, with her blazer draped over the back of a molded plastic chair, not moving much, legs crossed, one heel dangling just off the edge of her toe. It wasn't nerves, it was precision. A young assistant with a headset had offered her still water. No lemon, no conversation. Jasmine thanked her. The door clicked shut again. No one had stopped by to chat logistics. No producer doing the warm, let's make this easy schmooze. Not even a knock from the green room next door. She'd been here before, but tonight, the silence felt curated. She glanced at her phone. No new messages, just the time blinking too fast. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and opened her notes. Not because she needed reminders, but because the act of reviewing was its own kind of armor. She wasn't prepping lines. She was tightening the screws. This wasn't her first national appearance, not even her first time facing someone who thought sarcasm was smarter than sincerity. But Maher was different. His brand wasn't aggression. It was amusement. His audience didn't cheer punchlines. They nodded at dismissals, shrugged at microaggressions disguised as debate. She knew the playbook. Dismiss the urgency, mock the emotion, pivot to the joke, laugh the woman out of her own argument. Jasmine had watched old clips in the car, not for content, for cadence. Maher's rhythm, the smirk before the jab, the smug lean back after a rhetorical swing. He didn't just talk over people, he punctuated them. She tapped her fingers against her mug, steady, quiet. Then she looked in the mirror. No cracks, no adjustments, just her reflection, sharp, centered, ready. When the knock finally came, it wasn't a welcome, just a countdown. You're on in 5. Jasmine stood, pulled on the emerald blazer, smoothed the lapels with both hands. No war paint, just clarity. She wasn't walking into a conversation. She was walking into a test. And the answers, They were already written in her spine. The lights came up like they always do. Bright, fast, a little too clean. The applause sign blinked above the audience, and they followed the cue like they were supposed to. Clapping not because of excitement, but because of habit. Pavlovian energy. And at the center of it all, Bill Maher leaned back in his chair with a grin that meant nothing and everything. He turned to the camera. "Our next guest," he said, "is a rising Democratic congresswoman from Texas. She's young, sharp, and possibly the future of the party." He paused, grinned wider. "Unless emotion gets in the way." The crowd chuckled. Jasmine didn't. She shifted slightly in her seat, not in discomfort, calculation. Her hands folded in her lap. Her posture didn't flinch. Her expression didn't move. Just her head, tilting the tiniest bit. Maher noticed. He liked when guests squirmed. He didn't know what to do with stillness. "Welcome, Congresswoman," he said, leaning in. "Good to be here," she replied. Voice smooth, balanced, the kind of calm that wasn't soft, it was sharp. Maher raised an eyebrow. "Let's start easy. Why do so many progressives these days feel the need to moralize everything? Feels like governing's been replaced by grandstanding." A few more chuckles. One clap, the safe kind. Jasmine blinked once, slowly. She didn't jump. She didn't joke. She just breathed. "I think," she said, "you're confusing moral clarity with emotional excess." Maher smirked. "Same difference in today's headlines, right?" Jasmine tilted her head again. The move was becoming familiar now, almost rhythmic. "Depends who's reading them," she said, "and who's being written about." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't match his energy. She just let the words hang. Maher sat up slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but she did. He was testing for heat and not finding any. Because Jasmine had learned a long time ago, some men throw fire just to see if you'll burn. She wasn't burning. She was studying the match. Maher adjusted in his seat. It was subtle, but it was there. He thought he could push further. He always did. "So let's cut through it," he said. "Isn't part of the problem that politicians like you, especially on the far left, care more about being performative than actually passing laws?" The word landed like he meant it to sting. Performative, as if advocacy was theater, as if the mic she used to speak truth was just a prop. Jasmine didn't speak right away. She looked at him, then at the audience, then back. Maher smiled, like he'd won something. And that's when he said it. "I mean," he added with a shrug, "you talk a lot about oppression and identity, but maybe what people really want is just solutions, not another victim story." The audience half laughed, half gasped. And Jasmine didn't move, not at first. She just let the sentence sit there, let it echo, let it reveal what it needed to. Then, finally, she leaned forward, not far, just enough. "I'm not here to play victim," she said, voice low and clear, "but I'm also not going to pretend a loaded question is just curiosity in disguise." Maher opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She kept going. "See, this is how it works. I talk about equity. You call it emotional. I talk about barriers. You call it whining. And when I don't smile while I do it, suddenly, I'm a problem." The room went quiet, not silent, not yet, but quieter. "You want policy," she said. "I've helped draft it, passed it, fought for it, but it never trends until someone like you calls it too much." Now the silence came. Maher blinked. Jasmine folded her hands again. "I didn't come here to be palatable," she said. "I came here to be precise." And just like that, the room shifted. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. And Maher, smirk fading, fingertips tapping, was the only one who didn't seem ready for it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't uncross her legs or shift in her seat. She didn't even blink more than usual, but the sentence cut through the air like it had been waiting to be spoken for years. "I'm not being small." That was it. Not defiant, not dramatic, just true, and that's why it landed so hard. There were no drum beats behind it, no snappy music cue to tell the audience how to feel, just 5 words spoken with surgical honesty, dropped like a stone into still water. The audience murmured, not gasps, not laughs, just that low ripple people make when they feel something real, but aren't sure if they're allowed to react to it yet. The camera stayed locked on Maher. He didn't speak, didn't smirk, didn't move. His fingers, so often tapping out punchlines on the edge of his chair, now sat still, like even they didn't know what to do next. Across from him, Jasmine hadn't moved either. She wasn't performing. She was placing something down between them. Not an argument, not a counterpunch, a boundary. One that had been tested in meeting rooms, courtrooms, committee hearings, and now on live television. And for the first time that night, it wasn't Maher leading the moment. It was Jasmine setting the terms, not with force, but with clarity. And clarity, when it's that sharp, doesn't need volume, it just needs space. Maher tried to find the rails again. It was subtle, but practiced. He reached for his water, gave a tight grin, and shifted his tone like he was switching lanes in a segment. "All right," he said, voice lighter, hands spreading out, as if that made the tension disappear. "So, let's take the emotion out of it. What's actually being done? I mean, policy-wise." But the audience didn't follow him this time. The laugh didn't land, and Jasmine wasn't letting go of the moment just because he was uncomfortable sitting in it. She turned just slightly toward the crowd, then back to him. "See," she said quietly, "that's the trick, isn't it?" Maher blinked. "What is?" "You frame me as emotional. Then when I stay calm, you call it strategic. Either way, I lose." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jasmine leaned forward, just an inch. "You ask what's being done? I've helped draft legislation. I've backed bills. I've negotiated line items that never make headlines. But you don't ask about that first." Her voice was even, unshaken. "You start with the tone, with the personality, with the performance. Because when a black woman walks into a room with power, the first thing people try to do is edit her." The crowd was silent now, not stunned, listening. Because that's what happens when someone tells the truth without flinching. Maher tried one more pivot. "But don't you think identity politics—" "You mean reality," she interrupted. "You're asking me to separate who I am from how I govern. As if they don't shape each other. As if the world hasn't already done the math for me." Another beat, then she finished. "I'm not here to be filtered through your comfort. I'm here because the people I represent don't get invited to conversations like this. So, when I speak for more than myself." The room stayed still. Maher exhaled through his nose, quiet, deflated. And Jasmine? She folded her hands again, composed, not retreating, not escalating, just reclaiming what was always hers, the microphone, the narrative, the space. It only took 9 seconds. A single clip, ripped from the live feed and trimmed into a square frame, subtitles burned in white at the bottom. "I am being civil. I'm just not being small." That was the line. The moment when Jasmine didn't just answer a question, she redefined the terms of the conversation. And by the time the credits rolled on the episode, that clip was already in the bloodstream of the internet. It started small. A few retweets. A handful of comments from people who were half watching the show, eyes on 2 screens at once. Then it spread. The tone shifted. Not, "she dragged him." Not, "she clapped back." But something else. "She didn't flinch." That was surgical. That's how you hold power without shouting. By midnight, the quote had been typed into captions over stills, edited into TikToks with cello music underneath, layered onto black screens like a mantra. It wasn't loud, that was the point. The internet, so often obsessed with heat, now found itself moved by something colder, clearer, a kind of stillness that couldn't be mocked or memed into a punchline. This wasn't a viral comeback. It was a correction, a reset of the rules, and people felt it. Not just the ones who watch C-SPAN or scroll political feeds, but nurses in break rooms, teachers grading papers, baristas on their 5-minute phone check, young women sitting on the edge of their beds, reading the subtitles while brushing their teeth. For them, this wasn't just a moment on TV. It was recognition, a reminder that you don't have to yell to be heard, and you don't have to shrink to keep the peace. By morning, the machine had kicked in. The headlines dropped fast and shallow, written by people who didn't watch the full segment, just the clip. Crockett lashes out on Maher. Fiery clash on late-night TV. Tense exchange rocks. Real time. And just like that, Jasmine's restraint got rewritten into rage. Proof of the very thing she'd said on camera, that a black woman with clarity gets described with fire, even when she never raises her voice. Maher's team said nothing. No tweet, no quote, no clever spin to soften the blow. They went quiet, the way people do when the usual tools stop working. But Jasmine's phone was anything but still. Text after text, DM after DM. Not from pundits or power brokers, from people. A mother in Kansas City who wrote, "I showed it to my daughter. She whispered, 'That's how I want to sound someday.'" A junior staffer on Capitol Hill, just 3 months into her job. "Thank you for not blinking. I needed to see that." An email with no subject line, no signature, just one sentence. "I've been made small for years. You made me feel tall again." Jasmine read them one by one, sitting at her kitchen counter in silence. No press tour, no Instagram Live, no tweet thread explaining the subtext. She didn't need to respond. She already had, on air, in full control. With a sentence that didn't just defend her, it freed the ones listening. Because sometimes the loudest thing a person can do is not yell. It's to look someone in the eye and say, "You don't get to shrink me. Not today. Not ever." There was no media tour, no follow-up interview on cable, no back-to-back podcast circuit, no headline-chasing tweet thread. Jasmine let the moment breathe. She didn't chase it. She didn't need to. Instead, she flew home, back to her district, back to the real pulse of her work. Concrete floors, folding chairs, cafeterias that doubled as town halls, local pastors who opened with prayer and uncles who whispered, "You got 'em good," before shaking her hand. It was in these rooms, flatter lighting, no cameras, where the moment landed the hardest. An older woman in Mesquite, maybe late 60s, approached her after a school board roundtable. She didn't give a name, just leaned in close and said, "You said what I never could." In Garland, a teenage girl held up her phone with the clip paused at Jasmine's face. "I played it for my mom," she cried. "I didn't know why at first." And in Dallas, after a Q&A with high school interns, one young woman lingered behind. She looked nervous, like she'd practiced her sentence in her head for hours. "How do you stay that calm when people come for you?" Jasmine didn't give a rehearsed answer. She just smiled and said, "You learn to decide what deserves your fire and what deserves your clarity." That was the real win, not the trending tag, not the retweet from someone with a blue check, but the shift it sparked in people who didn't need to go viral to be seen. Because power isn't always about noise. Sometimes it's about being heard in rooms that were never built for your voice to carry. She wrote it down later, just 5 words in her journal, a black notebook, leather-bound, nearly full. Not loud, just clear enough. The clip had stopped trending. The news cycle had moved on. Some celebrity divorce, a new scandal, the churn doing what it always does, forgetting fast. But Jasmine hadn't done this for the moment. She'd done it to draw a line. And the thing about lines drawn in truth, they don't fade as quickly as headlines. The real legacy wasn't the silence in the studio after she spoke. It was the silence that echoed in people's heads days later, when they were alone, when they remembered what it felt like to see someone hold her ground without raising her voice. Because in a world that expects black women to shout just to be heard, Jasmine rewrote the rule. You can be still and still shake the room. A high school teacher in Tulsa printed her quote and pinned it to the wall of her classroom. "I am being civil. I'm just not being small." A social worker in Detroit scribbled it on a sticky note for her desk. A nurse in Baton Rouge said it under her breath after being interrupted for the 3rd time in a staff meeting. This wasn't just resonance, it was reflection, and in every place it landed, something shifted, quietly, permanently. Jasmine closed her notebook, the ink still fresh. She didn't need to speak again, because the world had finally paused long enough to listen. And once a room hears a woman like that clearly, it never sounds the same again. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.